If you're a portrait painter and you find that you don't really have a lot of consistency or efficiency in your work, you may need to start creating a procedure or a system to help you along the way. If there's one thing I noticed during the earlier part of my portrait painting career, is that I didn't really have a full procedure in place for how I approached my portraits, and for the longest time I thought that was a good quality not to have any sort of set procedure for my work, but I've learned over the course of many years that having a procedure, having some sort of system in place is very important and can help you out with a lot of different aspects to your artwork in general. And before I get into those exact reasons why this can really help you out, I just wanted to quickly mention, if you want to learn more about my process and how I go about painting, feel free to check out my Patreon page. It has a lot of great tutorials that will help you become a better painter. These tutorials include how to draw with paint, how to color mix, and many other tutorials for beginners all the way up to advanced. The first thing I want to clarify before we talk about why you should have a procedure or a system in place is that you definitely don't want to be a robot. You don't want to hold yourself back from being in the moment. I think there's a balance that you need to find between being spontaneous, but also having a procedure that will help you in creating a consistency to your work. Now, if I was to use this painting as an example, this one is very much how I go about most of my work. I like to start with the dark areas first, just do a quick rough pass. I'm just essentially toning the panel in a way where I have things roughly located. After I get that first initial pass of dark colors, then I start working on the midtones and then into the light areas. Of course, that makes it very easy to have some fun, loose brush strokes and not get too robotic about it. It allows for a lot of freedom, but it also allows me to get things done in an efficient way. So what's one of the first benefits to having some sort of system in place? Well, I think the first one is consistency. When you start to map out a way to approach your work, you're going to find that your results are more predictable and reliable. Now, this can be especially important when you're doing a portrait painting because you're trying to capture a likeness, and if you try different procedures and you don't have anything set in place as far as what works for you, you may find that your progress as far as creating a likeness from freehand drawing is very difficult if you don't start to think about your natural rhythm of how you like to approach your work. And everybody's a little bit different. For me, I have a certain set of sort of guidelines that I like to go about when I'm drawing one of my portraits, just to make sure that the likeness comes through, that the accuracy is there. All these things together really help to create a system that works for me. Now, this system that you're creating also goes hand in hand with your style. When you're creating your style, you're also thinking, how do I get to that style? How do I reproduce this over and over again? And by having a system in place, that will really help with that objective. For example, my paintings, this one in particular, I would say the likeness is almost secondary to the kind of emotion that I'm trying to create. Even though I am trying to create a fairly close representation of the subject, I am not worrying about that as much as creating a certain feeling to the work. So because of these things, it really affects the way I go about painting. One of the second big reasons, I think, besides consistency that really pushes you to want a sort of system in place is efficiency. I think for me, I was getting a little frustrated years ago with how my portraits were developing. It felt like I was spending way too much time figuring things out and getting to a certain place with my work. And I was thinking, well, how can I make this more efficient? And I just naturally started thinking, okay, well, what works the best? Look at the last 10 paintings, last 20 paintings. And by realizing which paintings had the most success, I started to go down a path of, okay, how do I approach my next painting in a more efficient way to get this final result? And by starting to have this mindset, I started to think, okay, there is a very big connection between your style and your procedure. So I thought, well, what do I want to get out of my work? What do I want my final paintings to look like in the next year, next 2 years? So I started from the ground up with a procedure to get this final result, and I tried many different things, but as I go and as I progress into new developments in my style, I always think about the procedure at the same time. It's almost like this creates a side effect of efficiency by doing it this way. And what are the benefits of being more efficient? You can create more artwork, you can create your artwork quicker, you can sell more artwork. There's so many ripple effects to looking at your artwork in this way. Having some sort of system in place is especially helpful when you like to freehand draw like I do. I know for me, when I am developing a portrait and I'm trying to get things as accurate as possible, with my system, it's easier to figure out where things went wrong when something doesn't turn out like it should. I know from just checking angles and shapes and things like that while I'm going, if there is a step that maybe I skip, that is usually when the errors happen. If I get a little too far ahead of myself with a portrait where I didn't start with the biggest shapes first and then whittle it down to the smaller and smaller details, that's usually my biggest issue, is if I get a little impatient with creating the likeness. But just like our styles, I think everybody should find a system or an approach that works best for them. And I think the way you go about that is by looking at other artists, looking at the work they're producing, and by seeing the kind of art that you like and the style that you like, that will give you a good indication of what kind of system you need to create for your body of work. Another bonus to doing all of these things is that you're going to develop a better skill set. By creating these procedures, you're going to see where you lack in fundamental techniques, and you're going to start focusing in on those things and developing those skills that will reinforce the style that you're trying to create. And this could be things like proportions or shading or color theory, anything that will help you get to your final goal. I think the one skill that I was definitely lacking in many years ago was using color theory to my advantage. With my new body of work, I use a lot of interesting color dynamics to create a unique feel to my art. And I had to sort of start from scratch many, many years ago to understand color at its fundamental level. And after I figured out those fundamentals, I kept building and building those up until I could apply them in a way that worked for my procedure and worked for my style. And if all of you give this a shot, I think what you'll find is that after maybe a year or two, maybe a few years, it kind of depends where you're at now, but you'll start to get this warm, fuzzy feeling that you have everything in place that you need to create the art that you maybe visualized many years ago. I think to do all of this, though, you have to be self-aware. I think being an artist and creating the work and creating good work, you have to be self-aware of how good you are at certain things and how bad you are at other things. And that's very tricky, to have a very good overall objective opinion on where your skills are. Now that I'm getting kind of close to the end of this painting where I'm going to put some nice pops of blue color into it, I thought I'd just quickly mention again that if you do have any questions for me, feel free to write them in the comments section, send me an email. Make sure to check out my Patreon page as well. If you are an artist that is trying to get better with your portrait painting skills, there's a lot of great tutorials on there that can help you out. I also upload art prints that you can download and print yourself, as well as many other benefits to becoming a Patreon member. And with just a handful of brushstrokes left, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. I will talk to you again really soon.